should probably start.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a GreenFaith webinar. I'm sorry that we are starting a little bit late. We had a couple of technical problems that should be now under control, so we can get started. And we would like to welcome you to our Day 2 webinar in this two-part series that focuses on energy-saving strategies for faith communities. And we're very glad that so many of you have been able to join us today. I think that we had about 80 people signed up for the webinar, and we hope that you were with us also last week. That's because during today we're going to continue pretty much from where we started last week, or where we stopped last week. So today we're going to talk about a whole new set of energy conservation actions that are going to make a big impact on your energy costs. And let's, for the benefit of those that were not with us last week, we'll start again with introductions. And my name is Anne Rahikainen. I'm the Energy Services Program Director for GreenFaith. I've been with the institution for 3.5 years now, and I manage and develop our energy and sustainability related programming. We have lots of different services and programs available to help congregation green their facilities, and this energy management training that we provide today is just one of those. We'll provide our contact details at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to contact us with any questions that you have. And my co-host today again is Colby May. We're really glad to have him. Colby, would you like to introduce yourself also?
Yep, I'm assuming you can hear me okay, Ann?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Colby May, and for those who aren't here, I'm a certified energy manager. I'm also an ordained missions pastor and a graduate of Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. Just so you know a little bit about my background, I've been involved in certified energy management since 2001 and have performed probably over 2,000 energy studies around the nation. And anyhow, consult with GreenFaith for the past 3 or 4 years, and we have done a number of energy audits and other energy management related either workshops or yeah, that's me.
Okay, great. Well, let's now talk a little bit about a couple of practical things around housekeeping. And we're going to do the same thing today as we did last week. So we're going to keep you all muted throughout the webinar, and that's because we are recording the webinar, and then you will receive a recording of this week and last week sometime later this week or early next week, and you can share the recording with others and also listen to it again if you like to refresh your memory about the things that we talked about. But there is a way you can communicate with us, and we definitely want to hear from you throughout the webinar. And that communication takes place by using the chat function and the Q&A function. Both should be located in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And you'll use the chat function when we ask you all questions. We'll do some quizzes throughout the webinar. So answer those quizzes using the chat function. And then we will stop twice during the webinar to answer your questions. So for those, please submit your questions using the Q&A function. Sounds a little bit complicated, but the reason why we want to do it that way is that we can keep the two channels of communication separate from each other. So that's the way this is going to work. And now I'm going to hand it over to Colby. He's going to talk about our agenda, and then he's going to talk about lighting efficiency opportunities at congregations.
And Ann, I've lost the Q&A and the boxes at the bottom, so if somebody asks a question, I won't be able to see it. If you can see it, that's great, but I've lost that portion of the screen for some reason.
Okay, all right. Well, I apologize about that, everybody. So we'll see how we hope that comes back.
Okay, I don't know if you have it, but if you do, let me know. So anyways, last week we spent a good deal of time discussing the process pieces of energy conservation. We explained how we can get good foundation for energy conservation work by getting an institutional commitment in place. That Ann did a great job talking about that and creating an energy team Also, the importance of tracking your energy use, either by Portfolio Manager or other means. There are other platforms out there. If you're interested, feel free to send us an email. We also discussed the two most important energy conservation pieces. And if you remember, I would ask you, but again, I don't see the Q&A or chat box, but it was installing a 7-day programmable thermostat with meaningful temperature setbacks. So there were also some questions addressed. That's pretty aggressive. I do stick by the 45 degree or 55 degree in a colder environment. Say in Seattle, where it gets down to 5 and in single digits at night, if you're a heating setback of 60 degrees, that's going to cost your equipment to stay on pretty much all night just to maintain 60 degrees. So anyways, I sit back that we can answer some questions later about that, but we also talked about scheduling activities in your building, energy efficient manner. The two actions go hand in hand and cost very little to implement, yet they have a very large impact on your costs. All of the above, guys, it's really important that they address the behavior energy conservation strategies. According to the EPA, 30% of the energy we use is wasted, which means we can recapture that through no-cost behavior change. I am a huge believer in that, and I hope last week you were able to get some opportunities that would help you address behavior. But today, we're going to talk about the technology side of the equation. We will cover energy saving strategies for lighting, appliances, building envelope, and in particular, insulating and weatherproofing your building. We'll also discuss towards the end of the webinar today how to fund and finance your initiatives. That's important. We understand, financial and cash flow is always a big issue for houses of worship. So addressing these questions of funding and financing go a long way. Obviously, funding is a key element, and when you're talking about energy conservation, because we know that every congregation has limited budget. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to cover today. I'm going to go ahead and move into our lighting portion. There are 4 types of lighting that you will typically find within your building, and you see them there. You have your tube fluorescent lighting. We also call that linear fluorescence. You have your incandescent light bulbs, and hopefully you're doing away with those. We'll talk about that. You also have your exit sign lights, and believe it or not, those things do use a big amount of energy. We'll talk about that. Also, your outdoor lighting. If you recall, guys, the lighting is the third largest use of energy at religious facilities after heating and cooling. Heating and cooling are about 70% based on where you are on average. Lighting is about 10 to 20% based on where you are. So we need to put a good amount of focus on lighting in regards to energy conservation stuff. All right, so this is an important stat because we're probably going to ask you a few questions after the fact, if we can see your answers, that is. But there are a number of hours that, regardless of the type of light you use, one of the important issues is the number of hours that the lights are on. If we had all the time in the world, I would show you facts about delamping and if you have 1,032 watt T8s and you're able to delamp that, and if they're on 10 to 20 hours a day, which we see in a lot of areas, delamping and minimizing will actually make a big impact. Therefore, with any lighting upgrades that you do, it's good to focus on rooms in your facilities that get the most use throughout the week. This provides the quickest payback to the investment that you are making. A good rule of thumb is to focus on the areas of your building where lights are on 15 hours or more per week, right? What those rooms are may vary, based on facility, but often your nursery or preschool would fall into this category. They often run about 40 hours a week in many cases. Administrative offices or a parish hall also get this type of use. So those would be the areas that we would really want to start with in regards to lighting upgrade. Let's see here. There we go. Retrofitting your fluorescent lighting, specifically from what we call T12s, you probably heard of this, or T8s, is also one of the most important lighting efficiency opportunities in most sites. Modern efficient T8s have been around since the 1980s, but many churches still have those older T12s, and T12s stand for 12/8 of an inch. You see that are 1/2 inch T8s, or 8/8 of an inch is also 1 inch. Now you're going to see many utilities now recommend, and many engineering firms and energy management firms, including myself, recommend going from a 32-watt T8 to maybe a 13-watt or a 16-watt LED linear fluorescent. If you think of the concept, you go from 100, if you have a 4-lamp T12, that's 160 watts without ballast factor. If you go to a 2-lamp or a 3-lamp 13-watt, I mean, you go from 160 watts to 39 or even 26 watts. So that's a big impact. We'll talk about the cost here a little bit, but the reason we recommend the change, guys, is that the T8s and the LEDs are not only newer, but they use much less energy. Again, T8s 20 to 25% less than T12s. LEDs, which again I recommend as a priority, are much more aggressive. Also, T12s are gradually going away. They're no longer manufactured in the U.S., although you can still find them in stores. If you're wondering why fluorescent lights are the priority, guys, it's because you typically have many of these light fixtures in one room, in corridors and hallways. Many of them have, each fixture contains several, I mentioned it earlier, several fluorescent bulbs, from 2 to 4 bulbs. Many times you don't need that many bulbs, and if you would look about delamping opportunities, which we don't really address, you'd make a big impact and still be above what is called IESNA, who sets the illumination standard. You'd be above their recommendation. But secondly, fluorescent lighting tends to be in areas where you're building where the lights burn for the longest time. Again, office areas, classrooms, etc. Changing from T12s to T8 requires a small investment. The cost is about $40 for a 2-bulb fixture, including the ballast, which is a small box that conditions and starts the lamps. If you wanted to move to an LED, you're looking at about $60 a fixture, so about 50% more in cost. The good news, though, guys, the payoff for doing such an upgrade is quick, especially if the lights are used more than 15 hours per week. You don't need to replace the actual light fixtures. This is because the T12s and T8s have the same pin distance, same with the LEDs. Many of the linear fluorescents also have the same, so you can go in with the same fixture. You can go right into the same fixtures as well as the older T8s. You do need to change the ballast, though. Old T12s have electromagnetic. If you try to put a T8 in an electromagnetic ballast, it will burn out. So if you're switching from a T12 to a T8, you need to change the ballast. Often custodial staff and volunteers can help make the switch, typically not technically too difficult, but you might want to hire a contractor. So also remember that many states offer incentives and rebates. Guys, we see this all the time. Money, if you look at your bill, many times you're already charged an energy efficient measure for the rebate money. The PUC, the Public Utility Commission, has mandated that investor-owned utilities decrease their transmission and distribution by 10%. So instead of building more towers, they're doing this through rebate and incentive programs. Massachusetts, Connecticut have they'll pay for 70 to 80% of your lighting cost. And then so on. So other states like Texas, it's 20 to 40%. So please don't leave that money on the table. It's excellent. Reach out to your utility provider. And lastly, be sure to recycle your old lamps, discard them at appropriate drop. Reach out to your utility provider or contractor if needed. So we now know that incandescent bulbs, okay, many of you probably have those and probably starting to switch over to CFLs or to LEDs, but incandescent bulbs are very inefficient. And if you think about the concept, 95% of the energy used in your average incandescent light bulb is actually turned into heat rather than light. Think about the inefficiencies. Obviously, LEDs and CFLs do away with that, a lot of that at least. If you've ever touched an incandescent bulb, if there's been a little while, you'll notice that the bulb gets very hot. As of 2014, regular incandescent bulbs like a 100 watt, 60 watt, 75 watt, etc., are no longer manufactured in the United States. It can't be imported. You can still buy them, but you're slowly going away. Obviously, they no longer meet the federal energy efficiency standards. Your option is to upgrade to either a CFL or an LED. CFL, again, stands for compact fluorescent light. Those squirrely little bulbs, you know what they look like. That you see them everywhere now, and use 75% less energy than incandescent bulbs. Last 7 to 10 times longer. LEDs are the most efficient alternative, and I recommend that. I recommend both, but I recommend LED obviously above the rest. But they use 90% less energy than incandescents. The highest quality LEDs can last for decades. It's all based on burn hours, and others will last certainly for several years, again, based on burn hours. The thing you see with incandescents, CFLs, and like THT12s, they lose their lumens as time goes on. So they're not as strong as they used to be the older they get. However, LEDs never lose their lumen factor. Much more efficient, great light. I could spend a whole day just talking about the importance of LEDs, but obviously we don't have that. Both cost more than incandescent, so focus on changing the bulbs that are lit more than 15 hours per week. Hint, your sanctuary lights may only be lit a few hours a week, so typically they aren't a priority. However, if you want to upgrade your sanctuary light, consult with your lighting professional. We suggest this because sanctuary lighting most meets important aesthetic criteria, so you want to be careful about that atmosphere your lights create. I see it all the time. From an energy, and this is me speaking from an energy management standpoint, guys, we understand the importance of the worship and the aesthetic feel for lights that point up towards the ceiling. But from an energy management point of view, that gives you no task level lighting. So if the pastor or whomever, the leader, is willing to do away with that, or at least minimize that, I'd highly encourage you to look into that as an alternative. But of the two choices, LEDs obviously are the preferred alternative due to bigger energy savings. LEDs they're more expensive than CFLs. Again, that cost is coming down. But again, LEDs last a lot longer. So when you consider not only the initial purchase, but also the total cost of the two alternatives, over the life cycle cost. Sorry, something came through on my screen, so I don't know if somebody's asking a question.
Yeah, let's do the questions, Colby, at the when we stop. So I think that we just need to keep going in the interest of time.
Yep. The cost is shrinking. LEDs prices are starting to come down more and more. So keep your eyes out for sales. They happen all the time. But when shopping for LEDs, guys, a couple things to keep in mind. Quality, which means consistent and long-lasting light. You want efficiency. You get more light or lumens, as I mentioned, for less watts, which translates into more savings. And finally, you have three-year warranty over many of these bulbs, because the higher price of LEDs, many states have programs which provide excellent incentives. Again, Massachusetts, Connecticut, up to 80% of installed price hiring a contractor. So highly recommend you look into those. Again, program varies per state. Let's look at exit lights real quick. The energy savings opportunity here is that many religious facilities still have older, efficient exit lights. Now, many of these exit lights either have one 15-watt or two 15-watt or 20-watt. So they're incandescents. So you think every fixture has up to 40 watts. I've gone into facilities that have 50 to even 100 exit lights all over the place. So 140-watt exit lamps, that makes a big difference. Now you can go in though with a 4-watt or a 5-watt LED insert that can cost anywhere from $20 to $30 per lamp. That's the cheapest way, and that's why I recommend. But obviously, many churches also want to just to replace the fixture as well. If you're going to replace the fixture, that's going to drag out savings a little bit longer than it should. Just go ahead and move over to outdoor. Light more efficiently. Now, the fourth opportunity we mentioned is to make your lighting or religious facilities more energy efficient. Outdoor lighting tends to fall into two categories. You want safety and security. This is used to increase your safety, such as streets, parking lots at night, et cetera, et cetera. Big believer in that. Safety is priority over energy efficiency in many times. But then there is lighting that is used for the appearance, the aesthetics, and provide information, which totally understand. A good example of this would be lights that are used to highlight some type of signs or beautiful features on your building. Again, that's important. But from an energy management point of view, other than kind of showing off the beauty of the building, which is important, again, many times it's just maybe you keep it for a few hours on at night opposed to all night. But as we go through this section, guys, there are outdoor lighting. Again, we want to focus on safety. We want to look at appearance or informational purposes. You definitely don't want to skimp on light or safety. However, you may be using much more light that is really needed to overnight and needed in overnight hours. A good idea would be to ask a police department, for example, how much light is really needed to keep a facility safe. You can take steps to eliminate excessive light. If your congregation owns the outdoor lighting, consider putting in more efficient lights, such as LEDs. Many of your parking lot lights are. And did you take that over? Sorry, I lost control of the screen.
No, sorry.
It's okay. Many of your parking lot lights are 500 watt. High pressure sodium or metal halides. You can go from, if you have I've seen churches with as many as 100 parking lot lights, 500 watt parking lot lights that operate every day. That's an expensive practice. If you can move that over to a 70 watt LED equivalent, that's expensive. Price is coming down, $200 to $300. Part of that is renting a crane, put them up there, but it makes sense. And at the same time, you can reduce the burnout. Maybe some of your lights are shining too broadly, or worse, they may be shining into the sky. We talked about that. Take a look at your outdoor lighting during the night. You may find opportunities for energy savings. Sorry, guys. Hey, Ann, can you move that? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
Gotcha. Your outdoor safety lighting should be on all night from dawn till dusk. Based on what we recommend that you use a light sensor or a photocell. Many of these, if you're not familiar with a photocell, they're simply resistors that have a light-dependent resistance. This device turns the lights on when the surrounding environment gets dark, and in the morning, the photocell makes the light turn off. Obviously, it senses the sunlight when it senses the morning light. Nowadays, you can buy outdoor lighting fixtures and built-in photocells and LED lights that in many hardware stores, which make it easy to upgrade. On the other hand, though, lights used for appearance or informational purposes, you don't necessarily need to run those all night. We talked about that. Here's some examples of those lights that include, lights to highlight your outdoor signs, your steeple, your stained glass, which again is beautiful. But if we can conserve the amount that we run, in my opinion, it makes sense. We strongly recommend that you control this piece of lighting with a timer, and then you need to adjust the timer. Many of you might have lighting timers, but the thing I see when I'm in the field is people, even although they address the timers, they don't address it for time of day change and so on and so forth, which we have daylight savings time coming up pretty soon, if I'm not mistaken. This means this type of lighting rarely needs to be on later than 10:30 at night. Instead of dawn till dusk, you can turn it off. This type of lighting, after a reasonable hour. After you and your timers are set up, remember again to adjust it every few months based on daylight savings time. So let's see if you listened. I can finally see the chat and the Q&A. Hallelujah.
Mm-hmm.
So, question, regardless of the type of lighting you should focus on, quick question, right? On retrofitting, lights are typically on for 15 hours a day, more than 15 hours a week, more than 15 hours a month. Let's see if you guys have been listening or if anybody fell asleep. No, good job. B, 15 hours a week, you were listening. Good job, guys. Second question, Which type of indoor lighting provides the best opportunity, although they all do, but the best opportunity for energy savings if retrofitted? All lights are on for 15 hours or more per week. Is it your older T12s in classrooms, offices, hallways? Incandescent lights that can be replaced with CFLs, incandescent exit signs that can be retrofitted, or bathroom lights that are frequently on. See here. As I saw B, incandescent lights, that's important, but the most important are your T12s, where you can get upwards of 160 watts per fixture opposed to just a 60-watt incandescent bulb. And also your exit lights are important, but the most important, I was in a church yesterday, and I would say 80% of the lights were those linear fluorescents, either TH or T12s. So again, I would say that's the most important, is your T12s. Well, that's my spiel, and I don't know how we're doing on time, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to you.
Okay.
I don't know if you have time for Q&A.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of questions come about lighting. So what I'm suggesting that let's change our mode a little bit and just answer some of those questions if we can see them. And
yep, I can see them.
Can you see them? I saw one question that asked that whether LEDs and CFLs are dimmable. Can you answer that one?
CFLs and LEDs are dimmable. Now, the dimmable factor, and I would be careful with dimmable LEDs in the sanctuary. They're not, technologically speaking, they're not where they need to be in regards to incandescents and halogens, 150-watt halogens. So I would reach out to your contractor or your consultant to talk about what kind of dimming capability you have. So yes, they do dim, but you need to be careful about dimming capability in the sanctuary.
Okay.
Do you need fixtures or lamps on LED? You do not. There's no ballast for LED bulbs. Many times you can just go in and replace. If you're replacing a T8, you can go right back in and replace that T8 with an LED bulb. Here's another one. Faith communities in areas like Pakistan talking about water conservation, forest conservation, and conservation in religious perspective is a relative easy way concept of energy conservation. Would love to hear more about captivating interest of faith communities towards energy conservation. And I don't know if you want to address this a little bit, but I'll simply say that we're doing a lot in India, Nepal, even Congo and Beijing, and love using this idea of not only water conservation, sustainability like solar, and forest conservation as a means to empower the most vulnerable. And I think how it equips energy poverty is so important. I went to the deep woods of Congo, and there's no electricity anywhere. The way that these people are in poverty, that's a whole different story, and that's a whole different class, but everybody had a cell phone and everybody had a light because everybody had solar to either charge the cell phone and to keep a light on so kids could do homework at night and even connect online. I think how sustainability goes to empower and to equip those in poverty can go a long way. And then finally, I'll address this one, Ann, and then hand it back off to you. Outdoor lighting, a 500-watt change to an LED watt. What about the lumens equivalent? And certainly encourage you guys to look at this, but I would recommend that you go with the lumen equivalent. And I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I think a 500-watt is a 70-watt LED equivalent. Maybe it's a 300 or 400-watt, but I'll look. But if it could be 120-watt LED equivalent, but I'll check. I encourage you to do lumen equivalent, and maybe you didn't need 500 watt. Maybe you only needed a 300 watt to give you enough light to keep a good safety area. So maybe LEDs do give you good lumens though. 70-watt LEDs give good lumens. All right.
Okay, great. Well, I think that we probably need to continue in the interest of time so that we can cover the other areas. But thanks for all of those questions. We'll answer more of them towards the end of the webinar. And then again, if we don't have time to answer all of them, we'll answer those separately, via email so that you get your questions answered. So let's let's continue by talking about appliances. And Colby, I need you to move the slides for me. For some reason, I am again unable to move them, so I need your help.
You got it.
Okay. All right. So we are going to cover 3 types of appliances or topics regarding appliances today, and we're going to talk about refrigerators, water heaters, and also something that we call the vampire load. Okay, so among all the appliances that you have in your buildings, it's your refrigerators and your water heater that will provide the greatest opportunities for energy savings. And which one of these is going to be more critical will depend upon your facility and specifically how many units you have. For instance, some congregations here in the United States have food pantries, and in that type of situation, they will probably need half a dozen or more refrigerators to store all that food. So for them, the refrigerators would be the critical appliance issue to address. All right, so now let's first talk about refrigerators. And they are such a significant energy user in faith-based institutions because they're pretty much running all the time, 24/7. And one of the most important things that you can do with your refrigerators is that if you have more than one unit, which is often the case, then you want to think about consolidating the contents into just one refrigerator or as few refrigerators as possible. And then you would want to shut off the others until they are needed again. And this very simple action will save you a lot of energy. All right, and here's another tip to help you with your refrigerators and help them work more efficiently. So the first thing that you want to do is to make sure that you move them away from the wall, at least 3 inches away from the wall. And then you would want to vacuum the dust from all the coils and vents every year. And the reason for this is very simple. It's because refrigerators dissipate their heat through the coils in the back and bottom of the unit. And when you keep those clean, you provide more airflow, and then the heat can dissipate more easily from your refrigerator, and it's going to operate much more efficiently. All right. Now take a look at this graph and think, what do you notice over here? It basically shows the electrical use of refrigerators that were manufactured at different times in history. And what we really want to emphasize with this particular graph is that the older your refrigerator is, the more energy it wastes. It's because those standards have changed quite a bit over the years in terms of the energy efficiency requirements of these type of appliances. So the newer your unit, the less electricity it's going to use. Unfortunately, we find that a lot of faith facilities have really old refrigerators. So if that's the case in your facility, then it makes sense to replace those older units with newer and especially Energy Star rated appliances. And I will also add here that I just talked about the consolidation. So with that, you want to make sure that you keep the newer ones running and you shut down the older refrigerators that use more electricity. All right, so now let's talk about your water heater. And water heaters also use a lot of energy because they also run all the time. You may not realize that, but they're constantly turning on and off to keep the water temperature at the constant temperature. And we're going to look at 2 strategies that you can make to save energy with your water heaters. And the first thing that you can look at is the temperature setting. And what we find is that in many, many congregations, the water temperature is simply set too high. And our recommendation here is that you should keep the temperature no higher than 110 degrees. And there's a couple of exceptions to that rule, though. First is that some congregations may provide showers, and if that's the situation, then you would want to keep the temperature at 120 degrees. And many churches also have preschools, and there may be specific regulations that you have to comply from the state with that. So you need to find out what those are and comply with them. But for everybody else, the recommendation is to lower the temperature of your water heater, and that'll save you some money. And the other trick is to use vacation mode whenever you can. And the reason for this is that we find that quite a few religious facilities have a lot of days during the week when they don't really need hot water. There may not be a lot of people using the facility. So if that's the case in your situation, then you would want to turn off the water or turn off, put the water heater on vacation mode during those days, let's say from Monday to Friday, and then you turn it up again for the weekend when people will come to the services and there are lots more people in the facility using that hot water. All right, and then the other issue, or the third issue to look at with the water heaters, is the size of your unit. And the question here is that, is your water heater 40 gallons or larger? We see that quite a bit at houses of worship. Some of them have 80-gallon water heaters, which is typically quite unnecessary because the need for hot water is fairly limited. So the reality is that you probably only need a unit that is about 15 to 30 gallons. And if you have one of those bigger units, then you might want to consider replacing it with that type of smaller water heater. Or the other option is to install a on-demand, or what we call a tankless water heater unit. And these units only heat the water when it's really needed. And a lot of times they're very small in size and often located very close to the point where you need the hot water. For instance, in your kitchen, it might be under the sink. And these really work very effectively. One of our colleagues at GreenFaith installed a tankless water heater at her home. And she said that she saw very substantial savings on her gas bill. So they really do the trick. They do save you a lot of energy on water heating. And then there's a couple of other suggestions we also want to make regarding your water heaters. And one of them is that you happen to have a water heater that was manufactured before 2004, then you would want to cover them with an insulation blanket. And those blankets you can find pretty much at any hardware store. Newer water heaters have already insulated tanks, so this insulation strategy is not necessary for those ones. But our other suggestion applies to all water heaters, and that is that we recommend that we insulate the first 3 feet of the heated water out pipe. Especially important thing to do if your water heater is located in a cold place and unconditioned space. So it has to work a lot harder to keep that water hot. And the purpose of both of these strategies is basically make sure that you're not losing too much of the heat from your water heater to the surrounding area. And you keep that water as hot as possible, and you maximize the efficiency of your unit. All right, so now let's move on to the last appliance topic, and that is vampire load. So I wonder if you know what vampire load means. Basically, it's the electric power that is used by some appliances when they are in the off or in a standby mode. And a very good example of vampire load is, for instance, our phone chargers. Your phone charger, it's plugged to the wall, and it may be warm, and you may see that charging light burning, even if it's not connected to your phone, so it's not really doing its job. And this is a sign that the charger continues to draw energy from the plug, even though it's not connected to the phone and not doing the work it's supposed to do. And of course, this is a problem because it can really add up over time. And USA Department of Energy estimates that 75%, so whopping 75% of the annual electric power used for appliances is actually consumed when those appliances are in that type of off or standby mode. And that costs us $4 to $8 billion annually, so that's a pretty substantial footprint for vampire load. And here you might ask that, is there anything that we can do to avoid this? What would be the solution to avoid vampire load? And I'm not going to ask you to answer that in chat box because unfortunately I'm not able to see your answers. So I'm just going to continue. Maybe you might have guessed the response, but the right answer here is that we can use power strips. And the benefit of using power strips basically is that you can plug multiple appliances into power strips, and then you can turn them all off by just simply flipping that one switch on your power strip, and you turn all of the appliances off all at once. So power strips are really great in areas of your building where you have clusters of equipment, and we would recommend them in your administrative offices, both for your staff and clergy people. In your admin offices, you probably have a lot of computers, copiers, printers, fax machines, and stuff. So power strips make a lot of sense in those spaces. They may also be good in your kitchen to control your kitchen appliances, and sometimes also make sense using in your sanctuary, especially if you are using a lot of audio equipment during your services. And before we start talking about appliances, I'm going to talk just briefly a little more about Energy Star certification. And when Colby talked about LEDs, he talked about Energy Star and recommended that you all buy Energy Star rated LED bulbs because they're going to be much more better quality and all kinds of good things. And this really applies to all of your appliances. And you may already be doing this at home, but you should also consider doing this in your religious facilities. So the Energy Star is actually the highest efficiency rating for appliances. So we want to favor those appliances that have Energy Star rating because they use less energy, and they do that without sacrificing the performance of that product. So do remember Energy Star appliances because they help you conserve energy, they provide cost savings, and those products work really well as well. Okay, so that concludes the appliance section. And we're going to do a quick recap question around this and see what do you remember. And the question is basically, to reduce the amount of energy used by major appliances and office equipment, what are the 3 changes a typical religious institution should focus on first? And the options are: A, consolidate contents of multiple refrigerators into fewer units; B, purchase energy-efficient copiers and printers; C, turn down the temperature on water heaters and use vacation mode whenever possible; D, use power strips to turn off computers, office equipment, kitchen appliances overnight; E, use larger, more efficient water heaters; or F, replace older refrigerators with Energy Star models. So just think about those options, and now let's look at the right answers, Colby. All right, so the right answers are A, C, and D. We recommend this consolidation of refrigerator contents, turning down the temperature of your water heaters and using vacation mode whenever you can. And we also recommend that you use power strips. And you might think that, well, this is a little bit tricky question because some of those other options sound pretty good as well. But the reason we picked these 3 because they really don't cost you anything, and they save you a bunch of money, so they give you the biggest bang for your buck. And now I'm not going to stop for questions. I think that I'm just going to keep going, and then we'll have questions at the end. And we're going to talk about your building envelope next. And that's really the major last energy savings piece that we will talk about today. And I just want to show the definition of what the building envelope means here. And basically what we mean by it is that it's the physical separator between the interior of a building and the outdoor environment. And there's a lot of pieces that make your building envelope. We are talking about things like your external walls, your windows, your doors, your roof, as well as the floor of your building. And we certainly hope that you're doing a better job with your building envelope versus what you can see in these two pictures here. But for all of us, the goal is to tighten up the building envelope. So we want to close those gaps through which air can flow, which causes lots of energy losses. So now, what do you think is the top priority for tightening your building envelope in a religious institution? You can think about that for a little bit before we get to the answer. Well, we know that the answer is not new windows. We get that quite a bit when we talk to religious institutions, especially here in the United States. A lot of them are considering new windows to improve their building envelope. It's not the first thing to do. Certainly, we would not tell you to replace, we would not tell you not to replace your windows, but it's probably not the first priority action. It's because new windows tend to be quite expensive. So they have very long payback and they provide you fairly small return on your investment. We are going to talk about other more cost-efficient methods that are much less expensive to do and get you some really good results, and those are weather stripping and insulating your building envelope. And weather stripping all the windows and ill-fitting doors is actually the most cost-effective action that you can do around your building envelope. And we want to give you just a little bit perspective on this, on the importance of weather stripping. And our friends at Energy Star basically say that if you added up all the leaks, holes, and gaps in a typical home's envelope, so we're talking about home, not a big building here like a religious facility, those holes would be the same as having a window open every day of the year. So imagine that. So this is really a big area, and all of those small gaps and leaks in your building, you can think of will probably add up to a really considerable amount, maybe like keeping the door open all year round. So doing weather stripping is very cost-effective action and a power priority that we really recommend. And we've been around the block quite a bit, and we've seen that drafty windows and doors are very common in faith-based institutions, and especially in some of the older buildings, which many of us have. And here we have a couple of very easy tips that you can use to tell if a window or door needs to be weather stripped. So here are some signs for that. The first one is if you can actually feel the air when you put your hand near the door or window, you can feel the draft. Also, if you can see daylight through cracks around the window or door, definitely need to weather strip that. Or if you can see dust lines around door jambs and window sills, that's also a good sign. In terms of addressing this issue, we recommend that you go to a home improvement store and buy some weather stripping kits that are meant for windows and other weather stripping materials that are specifically designed for doors. And both are usually pretty inexpensive. And then the other suggestion that we have around this is that you organize a volunteer day, get some volunteers come in for a few hours, and then you just have them weather strip the entire building. And that way the work will go real quick, and it's going to be very cost efficient, and people usually can be trained to do weather stripping quite easily. The other area that is very common opportunity at faith facilities around the building envelope is window air conditioning units. You probably have them at your facility, and oftentimes they are left in the windows year round. If that's the case in your facility, then we recommend that you should properly seal and cover them to stop the airflow through the air conditioning unit. But the better solution is to actually remove them with the exception of the summer months when you use them for cooling the building. If you leave them in the windows during the winter time, there's going to be a lot of cold air that comes straight into your conditioned space, and then you just have to keep heating that cold air, and it's going to cost you more. So remove them if you can. All right, so the next question is about insulation, and you might be wondering if you should insulate any parts of your building and what area specifically would benefit from it. We get this from a lot of people. A lot of people think that insulating the worship space is the top priority. But our experience here is that oftentimes it's not possible to insulate the sanctuary space because of the architectural design of that area. Another factor here is that the sanctuary space typically has very low usage, so it's really not a priority because you're not heating that space as much as you might be other parts of the building. And a better solution is to weather strap instead any leaky windows and doors that you may have in your sanctuary. And last week we talked about those aggressive temperature setbacks. So our recommendation is with the sanctuary to make sure that you are not heating it when people are not using it, and that's often most of the weekdays, so from Monday to Friday. All right, so what about your uninsulated attic space? We think that insulating that is actually a great idea because those uninsulated attic spaces are often the biggest culprits of energy losses. So if your facility does have such a space, definitely consider insulating that one. And here we recommend that you hire a professional, somebody who does insulating all the time, and they can help you evaluate how much insulation you need and also what is the best product for insulating your particular application, your attic or other space that may need insulation. Okay, so here's our last recap question. And this question is about tiling your building envelope. And the question goes, with regard to the building envelope, which action step provides the greatest and most cost-effective energy saving in most houses of worship? And the options here are installing new energy-efficient windows, weather stripping leaky doors and windows, or insulating the sanctuary or worship space walls. So what do you think is the right answer over here? Let's look at that now. Okay, great. So the answer here is weather stripping leaky doors and windows. All right, and now we are going to get into a really important question as part of this conversation. And here, consider everything that we have talked about during the last 2 days. With regard to that, our question is, does your institution have $50,000 to implement an energy savings plan? Just think about that for a moment. Well, I think I hear a resounding no from everybody, and that's okay because you really don't need that money. We're going to talk about financing next, a little bit more, but as you think about all the things that we have talked about last week and this week, a lot of the recommendations are no cost, and most of it is fairly low cost. So our point is that there's a lot of things that you can do without having a very large budget. And I just want to remind you about the stuff that we've talked about by doing a very quick recap. So here are some strategies that don't cost anything to implement, and we are showing there the first one. You've got the power steps like benchmarking. And here I can tell you that research actually shows that folks who start to track their energy use show energy savings. So the simple act of tracking your energy use is going to change people's behavior, and you're going to start saving some money. You can also program some temperature setbacks. You can tune your equipment to its specifications for efficiency. You can change your facility usage to minimize energy consumption. You can set the water heater no higher than 110 degrees. You can turn it to vacation mode whenever you can. You can consolidate your refrigerator contents. You can move your refrigerator away from the wall, and then you can keep it clean by vacuuming the coils and vents. So those were all no-cost strategies that we talked about, and they will bring you a big payback if you implement all of those. And then some of the low-cost strategies that we talked about was purchasing programmable thermostats. And those typically only cost about $50 a piece, so not a big investment, but will be very helpful. You can change to CFLs. You can purchase some power strips and use them to turn off your appliances at night. Or you can purchase and install weather stripping materials. Or do we have anything else there? I guess not. But all of these cost fairly little, and again, result in great savings as well. And then there's a couple of things that we have talked about that cost a little bit more. So here we covered retrofitting your T12s with T8s, or you could go all out with LEDs. You could purchase a new smaller water heater or an on-demand hot water heater, or you could do some insulation. So all of these things cost a little bit more, but you might be able to fund them with the money that you save from doing all the other recommendations that we showed before. So now let's go over a couple of strategies regarding funding or financing your work. And here we have 3 different options for you to consider. And the first one is self-financing, which I kind of just explained. Then we have performance contracts. And then there's the third-party financing. And I'm going to explain each one separately in a minute. But, you should always keep in mind that your utilities or your state government may have programs, and most likely will have programs available, incentive programs and rebate programs that can help you pay part of the project, things like lighting and heating and cooling equipment also in some cases. So you always need to look into those. Regarding self-financing, the way this model works is that first, you want to implement all of the no-cost conservation measures that we covered to generate some savings first. And then you use those savings to fund energy efficiency retrofit projects. And always remember to look for state and utility incentives and rebates. You've earned those, you've paid for those. And we have seen this model work really well at many, many congregations. And then the performance contract, the way this works is that some energy management companies offer financing programs, loans, especially for lighting retrofit projects. And then the savings from your retrofit projects service the loan payments. So in this type of situation, you actually don't have to put money down at all. And our experience here is that, especially if you happen to have a bigger facility, then this type of performance contract may be available to you. But it always makes sense to ask your contractor, whoever you develop a relationship with, to do your energy efficiency retrofit project, to ask them about a potential performance contract availability for you. All right, and then the last option is third-party financing. And what this means that here you actually go to some outside source to fund your project. And here, what we have learned is that most religious associations or denominations have some type of loan program available for capital projects. They may call it a building loan program, or it may actually be specifically for energy efficiency and renewable energy work. So definitely find out about that. The interest rates tend to be the best available anywhere, ranging from 2 to 5%. And then they typically want you to pay back that loan within 3 to 5 years, and you can use your savings to pay back that loan. But every denomination is a little bit different, so you need to find out what your denomination does in your area, or nationally for that matter. Another option, Colby, can you go back? The other option is your local banks. So they may do the same. If you have a great relationship with your local bank, you might ask them about third-party financing, especially if your religious denomination does not have a building loan program for this type of purposes. And always check for utility and state rebates and incentives, because the money that you would get from those programs, you don't have to pay that back, and then it reduces the amount of third-party financing that you might need. Finally, our last priority recommendation is that you should use that self-financing model first. So what you do over here is that you implement all the no-cost conservation steps first. You track your savings, and then you use those savings to pay for your higher cost energy efficiency retrofit work like lighting, and that does work. All right, so hope you are all ready to get started. And last week we talked about the most effective strategies to start your energy efficiency conservation project, and our recommendations in regard to that was that first of all, you should establish an energy team that will work on this stuff. Then it makes sense to pass a resolution, go public with your commitment to conserve energy. You may want to benchmark your energy use to figure out where you're starting at and set some goals. And you want to communicate about your project, especially to all of your congregation members, so that you can get them to support the work that you will be doing and get everybody's buy-in. Okay, so I think at this point we can answer a couple of more questions. We have a couple of more minutes to do that. Colby, can you have a look, see what kind of questions we have?
Sure. Let me go and start from the bottom. Christine says utility incentives are usually reflected in tax rebates, but as a 501c3, we are not eligible. Any information other than incentives and rebates, and maybe you want to answer this, but for utilities and rebates, they're not necessarily tax rebates. So they go to a church or a house of worship. You are eligible as a nonprofit to go after utility incentives.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right, Colby. And I think that the only situation where you might not be eligible for state and utility rebates is if your utility is a co-op. But if your utility is a public utility, then they always have some type of program, and typically those incentives are highest for your lighting retrofit projects. And as Colby said, sometimes those incentives pay for 80% of the installed cost of your project. So please call your utility and find out more.
Sure. Richard asked real quick, what other devices, what about devices to measure energy use by appliance?
All right. Well, maybe Colby, you can take that.
Yeah, there's some out there, and maybe we could send an email out that you have plug load adapters, and sometimes you have smart plugs that can actually capture the amount of energy you use for appliances like refrigerators and so forth. If you wanted to do it manually, you can look at the tag in the back with a model number in the back and look at the amps and watts and do a little equation on how much it's costing you, and just use what your cost per kilowatt hour is as well to do that. Maybe we can send some more information about that.
Yeah, let's do that.
Hey, and
I think we all right, you have logged in. I think that we are running out of time. Let's try to do one more question, then end the call.
There's really two good questions. Let's do, what about energy implications of using tankless water heaters?
Energy implications. Well, what I try to explain is that they are very energy efficient because they don't have a tank. So they only use or heat the water when it's being used. And that's why they are, like when you open your faucet, that's when the tankless water heater starts to heat your water. And a lot of times they operate on electricity. So that's how they save that's how they save you energy.
Perfect.
Okay. I think I'm receiving a message that we have to log out because somebody else needs to do another call after this. So I think that at this time we have to end the webinar. We are happy that so many folks logged in. Thanks for your participation and your questions. And let's show the last page real quick that has our email addresses.
So sorry, trying to.
Yeah.
So sorry. There we go.
Yeah, there you go. So those are our email addresses. Feel free to contact either me or Colby with any additional questions, and we'll get right back to you. And again, any questions that we weren't able to answer, we'll answer those individually after the fact. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, guys.
Colby, are you there? I'm trying to end the meeting.
Me too. Me too. I can't get out of it.
You log out, and maybe I can do it then.
I might just have to I'm trying. I might just have to restart my computer because it's not letting me. Here we go.